It all starts with a single locked door. But this story, well, it ends up redefining the very meaning of home for married women across India. This isn't just about one court case. It's a journey through family law, property rights, and a really fundamental question: where does a woman have the right to live?
So let me ask you a question. Can you be legally locked out of your own home? I mean, the place you live, the one you share with your spouse. Imagine you come back one day and the locks are changed. Can they do that? You'd think the answer would be a simple no, right? Well, for one woman, this wasn't just a hypothetical. It was real. And it was the start of a legal fight that went all the way to the top.
Okay, so let's put a name to this story. Taruna Batra. She got married in 2000 and lived with her husband Amit in a house, but here's the key detail, a house owned by his mother. As the marriage started to fall apart, things got pretty dramatic. After a dispute, Taruna tried to go back to that house, the home she'd shared with her husband and their son, only to find the door was locked. And that single act lit a fuse on a legal battle that would challenge the very rights of a wife in her marital home.
So what does she do? She takes him to court, of course. She just wanted the right to get back into her home. Seems straightforward enough, but oh no, it got complicated, really complicated. As her case started climbing the legal ladder, it was like the courts just could not make up their minds, giving completely different answers to the exact same question.
Just look at this legal roller coaster. In 2003, the first court says, yep, she can stay. A year later, a higher judge overturns it and says, nope, she has to leave. Then in 2005, the Delhi High Court flips the decision again, saying she absolutely has the right to live there. Can you imagine the whiplash? Her life is just hanging in the balance. With this much back and forth, you just knew the Supreme Court was going to have to step in and have the final say.
So why all the disagreement? Well, it all came down to two totally different ways of looking at what a home is. The senior civil judge took a very technical, by-the-book approach. He said, look, the husband moved out, so it's not the matrimonial home anymore. Plus, it's his mom's house. But the Delhi High Court had a completely different take. They said, hold on, a husband can't just move out and declare that the home is gone. They focused on the reality of where the couple had actually lived their life together. This huge disagreement is what pushed the case into the main event, the Supreme Court of India. In 2006, they took up S.R. Batra versus Taruna Batra, and everybody knew this decision wasn't just going to affect one woman, it was going to set a precedent for millions.
The entire case hinged on one simple term: shared household. The court's 2006 definition was incredibly specific. They said a wife's right to live in a place only applies to a house her husband owns, rents, or has a legal share in through a joint family. And the most crucial part? This definition did not include a house owned solely by her in-laws, even if she had lived there her entire married life.
So why did the court draw such a hard line? They were worried about something called reductio ad absurdum, basically following an idea to its most ridiculous, absurd conclusion. Their fear was that if any house a couple had ever lived in could be claimed, it would open the floodgates. A wife could try to claim residence in the homes of uncles, cousins, brothers, you name it. The court saw this as a potential path to social chaos and wanted to shut it down.
But here's a really fascinating twist. Even as the court laid down this strict rule, the judge writing the opinion, Justice Markandeya Kachu, openly admitted that the law itself was poorly written. He actually called the definition the result of clumsy drafting. It's this rare, candid moment where the court basically says, yeah, this law isn't great, but they still felt they had to interpret it in a way that would avoid what they saw as total pandemonium.
And so, the final verdict came down. The Supreme Court ruled that a wife's right to a home is a claim against her husband, and her husband alone. Since the house belonged to her mother-in-law, Taruna Batra had no legal right to live there. That lock on the door was, in the eyes of the law, legally justified.
For many, that seemed to be the end of the story. A clear, if pretty harsh, legal precedent was set. But the law isn't static, you know. It evolves. And 14 years later, this story would take an unexpected and really dramatic turn.
14 years. Just think about that. From 2006 all the way to 2020, the Batra decision was the absolute authority. Countless legal cases about property and family disputes were decided based on this very strict interpretation. It was settled law, or so everyone thought.
Then came 2020 and a new case, Satish Chandra Ahuja versus Sneha Ahuja. And the facts are going to sound pretty familiar. A daughter-in-law living in a house owned by her father-in-law. But this time the Supreme Court decided to take another, much closer look at that whole shared household idea and the precedent set by the Batra case.
And this is where the law really did a 180. The 2006 ruling was an absolute no, but the 2020 ruling, it changed the answer to, well, maybe. The court basically said that if a woman has lived in her in-laws' property for a long time and everyone has been treating it as her permanent marital home, she might actually have a right to live there. That absolute bar was gone.
So, after this major shift, where does the law stand today? Well, the hard lines of the Batra case have been softened, and they've been replaced by a much more flexible, fact-based approach that tries to find a new kind of equilibrium. All right, here's the lowdown on how it works now. That strict rule from the Batra case is gone. Instead, courts use what's called a permanency test to see if the place was treated as the marital home long-term. The goal is to find a delicate balance between a wife's security and the property owner's rights. Now, this doesn't create an absolute right. A court can still order the husband to provide a different, suitable place to live. And of course, just casual or short-term stays don't count.
And that leaves us with the central question that the courts, and really all of society, are still grappling with. What started with Taruna Batra's locked door has now evolved into this really complex legal landscape. There are no easy answers, just this continuous effort to find that delicate balance between a woman's fundamental need for security and the established rights of property ownership. It's a debate that really gets to the heart of what a family owes its members and what the law can do to protect them.